I'm surprised how many of you arrived after dinner, and especially there are so many interesting talks right now, so thank you so much. First of all, the idea behind this presentation is something more than showing pictures, but last year people were asking me, will I show something more than 10 years ago, because all my portfolio is from 10 years ago. So this time I will show some new things, my personal stuff, because I'm not allowed to show anything from the production I'm working on right now. My name is Konrad Czernik, and I'm working in Techland in Techland for over 10 years now, and the things I will show you will be more linked to how I observe people are working and preparing to the hardest tasks. And I'm not saying that this is official statement of Techland and any other company. I just observe how people preparing for the hardest tasks. And the expression that I brought in the theme here is taken from one anonymous woodsman who is actually who was asked what would he do if he had to cut a very big tree, and he answered about half of time of preparation. And this is very common sentence that we bring in artistic world, or maybe in even other faculties. And you will find that it's Abraham Lincoln sentence, but it's actually not, because Abraham Lincoln died in 1865. And this sentence was published in 1956. I like the sentence a lot because it tells me how I can spend time before actual drawing, because being efficient is not being first at the first second of getting the task. And especially as a concept artist, we need to prepare what do we want to do before actual drawing. It's good to make a brainstorming, but I will show you all the process that I make at the hardest tasks I get in my daily work. It's not like it's the only way of working, but if you'll take like 1, 2, 3 things for you, it's perfect, beautiful, and maybe you'll see something more. So the current situation of game industry is very rich, I would say. There are so many highly skilled painters, illustrators, the software is cheap. Games are getting better, actually beautiful and enormous budgets and features. And accessibility of everything is just great, but it's also at the same time difficult situation for us as an artist, because there are getting more and more people in the industry. So there is a less and less place for just good illustrator, just enough good artist, yeah. So recent years I was joining all the events I could, just to talk with my authorities and other illustrators, art directors, designers, asking them what will be the future of game industry. And they were saying that the main feature they see in their teams is the thinking and bright speaking through the image. So this was the big breakthrough for me. And you see ArtStation and other internet portals showing beautiful images. But very often, if you dig deeper behind this image, there are some mistakes of design, unlogical designs like architecture, mechanics. Sometimes mechs doesn't bend their arms or something like that. So that's very uncommon thing, I would say. And the thing behind the image has to be more focused on the mindset and the values behind the designing stage and brainstorming and preparing to the work. As I meet with the artists who I teach on afternoons, because I try to share whatever I know in faculties. Sometimes it's Academy of Fine Arts, sometimes it's just events. So I see very often impression of thinking as a about artists in industry like a free creator. At some part, it's important and true, but there are so many different things. Because I would say it's less romantic, for sure, because the competition is huge, industry is growing, there are all the events, tutorials on internet, technology is actually for free. You can make your art for completely no money on your afternoons. Tools are accessible, and working in the industry is also a very attractive and amazing work to do, because guys, we're making artificial worlds, you know, monsters, soldiers, knights, whatever it is, weapons, slashing. I was designing few zombies that I can slash and, you know, make gore images, and that's crazy, and they paid for that to me, so that's beautiful. And that brings another people, yeah. So finally, games are considered as art, finally, as well. So that brings another people from different faculties also. We have big budget, and those people that are joining these events are really hungry for not maybe money, but the experience, and putting their own impact to the things they see, and actually they critique that we're not doing it the best way we could. So I treat those feedbacks very seriously, and joining these events not only for taking lessons or something lectures, but listening what the people say and what they complain about. And the next situation will be very hard for us, especially. Next few years, all the countries will have access to internet, and the hardware will be much cheaper. And the first thing they will learn in the world is not the science, not the programming, not the hard things to learn, but the visual art, because it's quite easy to adapt. And I'm guessing that not the chemistry and medicine will be their main skill, but the beauty of the things they do. And I was doing many events on the south of Europe, and I mean south of the world, and believe me, you don't want to compete with people who are hungry. And the costs were lower according to illustration side. So the only thing I can do now is to share some things I've learned from productions that I was doing during these years. They're completely different productions, as you see. And I learned so many things through mistakes I was doing. I will not smash myself like I was an idiot, but while doing these games, we were rising as a company, and after doing Dying Light, we need to hire more and more people, and I realized how hard it is to find good artists. And right now I think we have 11 concept artists, and 3 of them is brought from the world, not from Poland, not because I like speaking English, but we couldn't just find people who thinks bright and communicate readable way, visual language through their designs. So that's actually how I realized sharing knowledge is the only thing we can do as the developers to raise our own family of artists and responsible artists. So this is the thing I can do, and I can share only my personal pipeline and my personal process. It could be silly, but maybe it will help you in some way. I was repeating very often about brief that we start. So usually if there is no brief, you should ask for some data. Sometimes it's the main function of the asset that you're designing. Sometimes it's the game requirements. For instance, it's a weight, speed of enemy, range that he's fighting by, or narrative information. What's the background of the village, house, or the character. Or just from art director emotional impact that you can judge. Someone can judge you through this criteria. Are you there, or you still need to work? But you need to balance that to require some data and not being Mr. Office guy who is waiting until the end of the documentary and then, okay, if you're set, I'm starting my work, yeah? So it's just to help you set the scope and know what you're doing and what's the main thing you need to focus on, not just doing beautiful images, because that's what I see very often when I do talks or lectures afternoons and workshops in Academy of Fine Arts or wherever it is. The people are focusing on just beautiful images. So having something that you can jump from is the good base. The next step I usually do is to making research. I know it's a very obvious thing, but I divide it on two surprising, maybe for you, surprising things, because research and references are a totally different thing for me. Research is just first part to see what do people understand through some specific theme, like this example here is just Google images from post-apo world. So it's good to set what people expect through the word that they type in the Google. So this is usually examples from comic books, movies, games, music clips, something like that. And I'm trying to write down main emotions, motives, and then pushing it further to the mind map, which is actually writing down what did I actually see in these images and destroying it on different chapters, and that helps me a lot to design actual design. Usually I'm focusing on at least one, maximum 3 features from that kind of mind map, so that gives me criteria to judge am I in the right way. Actually, this is the mind map I usually show to other people in the team. They give me feedback, what they would like to focus on, what's important for them. And that's actually very cheap and avoiding doing art being inaccurate. And the next step is the references, so it's more a scientific approach to Googling images. Not only Googling, but Pinteresting or whatever it is, but just finding how things work and how nature works, or how surfaces are working after meeting, flood or very hot climate, whatever it is. And I'm trying to use the most characteristic ones also, but trying to analyze the structures, because completely different is how asphalt looks in moisture and in a dry climate, for instance. And also, fun fact, while doing Warhound, it was 10 years ago, I find out that there are completely different sets of green jungle in different places in the world, for instance, and I was surprised why my Cambodia or my Colombia doesn't look like Colombia, but more like Korea. And we actually set the color scripts for nature, trees, palm trees, and all the bushes. And even the color and the shapes of the nature brought feeling of Cambodia, Colombia, and Korea, whatever it was. So that was quite easy to make on the reference stage because of this scientific approach. The second thing, for instance, is asphalt. I don't know, do you know that every asphalt in the world is completely different color? Our European Polish here is closer to blue. American is closer to almost white, yellow, gray scale, and somewhere in South America it would be closer to pink, for instance. And this is the things you have to pay attention for if you're designing actual image. And later on I usually make sorry, something's breaking, but next step is the mood board, where I'm picking up some frame that I will work on and adding elements that I would like to add to this image. And I do this only for very crucial, important places or important things like a group of people or main character or main enemy or something like that, because it takes time. But also we're setting we're standing on the one side with art director and trying to talk what will be the main focus of this task. If the task takes like 2-3 weeks, it sometimes happens. So preparing that kind of mood board for, I don't know, 2 hours, it's really saving time instead of doing actual illustrations. So we're setting, the weather, interesting motifs, which will be like, let's say, landmark or the theme, the surfaces, filling the gaps and holes, interesting object on the bottom, color script for the ground, and maybe impression of the thing that or the expectation from the market. Yeah. So this is the thing we do before we start the work, and then I actually start brainstorming and making very big number of rough sketches. The thing is missing here is overpaints of Google images or just things I saw on internet. It's very often that it's artwork or just pictures that I don't own, and it's just the beginning of the work. But it gives me rough ideas that I can push further in the later on stages. So this is cheap, and I usually fail and do crazy things, but I do crazy things with the knowledge from reference stage. So I know something, and then bring in rough ideas for many different environments. According to characters, the next stage would be, at every field, it will be next stage will be concept art designing. So this is finding shapes, thicknesses, design of elements. Whenever I agreed for something from the brainstorm stage, you'll see, the top view here inside is rough sketches of characters just to catch the flavor, and then whenever we are agreed, I push it to volumes and values, and this is the stage that I'm designing things. How the actual design looks like. So this is the summary concept art, I would say. And the summary concept art looks like that. Whenever you can see the details, you can see some rough colors, for instance, and it's ready to prototype in the game. And the prototyping in game is very important thing for us, because then you see will character be visible in the game. And we do that in every kind of game, even the short break studios that we had. We were designing characters in actual screens just to see which color stands out from the environment, and prototyping is a very important thing. So the same is with the 3D games. And yeah, in-game prototype shows you some mistakes. For instance, in Dying Light, we did the complete different view of weapon that you hand in your hand. Than Hellraid, so that's quite important what you're focusing on, which part, because if you would be focused on these elements, that wouldn't be completely visible in the actual game. So, and I first of all was designing the interesting tops, but after I saw it in the game, just like fifth part of that, I was a very sad person, so I focused on the handles and stuff like that. So that's quite important. A second thing is to making weapons for shooter, and I was designing weapons for Call of Juarez 2 and 3, not 4. And I've noticed that too many objects that are interesting on 2D view are actually not necessary in 3D, because the shape then, if you turn the object, you can see it's too complicated and too it's losing readability completely, because we need to keep it simple and readable for a player, and the most important things are here, close here. So usually we design weapons on the view that you'll see on the game. And the final concept art is the beautiful image. Sometimes it's rendered, sometimes it's comic book style, but it's just polishing that, and that's the most boring part for me, I would say. And also, the final concept art is containing references. Usually, it's just the surfaces or the motifs we are focusing on while doing the 3D models. And usually, 3D modelers and 2D artists are approaching our concept art team and asking what's the material, what's the fabric, what's the leather. So that actually shows you what's the most important thing for you as a designer, which surface should be hard, which should be soft, and how you mix those materials between each other just to see different specularity and roughness of the surfaces. And actually this image shows a quite interesting object because QA team gave me feedback that the character is just too dark and doesn't stand out from the dark dungeons. So we added some bright elements in the middles, and it didn't destroy the design, even added something interesting to that. But in the dark sections, you could actually see this character. So getting feedback and understanding what's the purpose of the asset is the most crucial thing. So even on the last stage, you can actually add something to be more efficient. Yeah. Oops. Yeah, so this brings us to communication, and for instance, this time Digital Dragons are focusing on art, visual arts and sound design, and I totally recommend you as an artist to talk with the guys who are responsible for sound and sound design, because the biggest impact for my designs put Wojtek Siadak, who is a sound designer in our company. I was working with many different guys, but this guy was asking very precise questions. So whenever we're designing Hellraid, I can't show you anything from Hellraid, but I can tell you stories. And he was asking me, whenever I showed him the concept of the dungeons, he was asking me, is the basement dry or moisture, because the sound of the silence is completely different in both of those rooms. And he gave me examples, sounds, how could sound the room which is very wet, and how sound the room which is sandy and very dry and dark. And of course, both of them were dark, but the darkness seems to be cold or warm. And after those questions, I've tweaked completely the designs through which 3D modelers and level artist was making this actual room. Second story is Agata Cholewa, who is art director of Warsaw. She's an amazing artist, and she made a whole spread of different concepts, and she was talking with Wojtek about the sound of the actual affixes, and they managed how to make it very readable for players. So the frost and the fire sound completely different. And the third situation was whenever Wojtek asked me what's the sound of the boots and of the character that I've designed, because he seemed to be very heavy, and he brought a bag with different boots and different elements of metals, leather and something like that, and he was showing me the sounds of these elements. Is it more like this, more like this, more like this? So I understood why he needs that, and actually put these elements which are sounding like he wanted, or he was guessing it sounds on this actual design. So communication and making the transition between teams is very important for me. And whenever I have task, I always thinking, is it possible that there will be some modular system or some system in the game, because I love systems, because it's so efficient to have like 200 objects in the game, making only 35 sets, and then you're mixing them together, and that's actually very very efficient thing, and making modular system is very very interesting thing for experienced people, because doing beautiful images becoming easy for you after a few years, and then you're trying to think more strategical, and that's quite fun. And I totally recommend you to think about systems, because it's so cheap. And in games, I think games are systems in general, less or more, but it's always system. And technology supports that a lot, and becoming a scientist is nice thing for me, because I always was stupid in primary school, so right now I can feel smart that I mix some things and pretend that I'm doing something like a scientist, And yeah, or even if you're making something more scientific, then you can feel like a doctor, for instance, because in that island, whenever I had Google for disease and something like that, I understood what the skin diseases, understand how they work, which disease goes closer to suicider, which one goes to runner, just to be readable for these characters. So making research of diseases, skin disease especially, is pain in the ass, because it's just ugly. But after some time I could eat breakfast watching that, no problem. But becoming a doctor is quite fun. You can say, I'm a skin doctor. Yeah, and a happy accidents. Maybe you know this guy, but there are no mistakes, there are just happy accidents. And of course, brainstorming is the best stage for happy accidents and keeping things crazy. But also keeping some part of you should be crazy all the time, because during this whole process, concept is becoming less and less bulky characteristic, I would say, especially if you put feedback from 7, 8 managers, and then you're going down to something mediocre. So it's good to keep one feature that you are paying attention for the longest. And if you think that this is the end of the presentation, it's not, because there is one thing is the most difficult for me, law and copyright, because no one talks about that. And this is this very serious thing in our industry, because we take references, and it's very important for artists, especially concept artists, to be responsible for the things you design, because if you don't pay attention to the things you take from internet, company or your team will suffer. And the most important thing is to not allow to go into the court and avoid things, avoid cases. And I'm not specialized in the law, but there are not too many main things you should follow. But you have to know that there is a registration and trademark. Trademark is not registered. Registered is not trademark. It's something different. But registrations are usually for some time. It's 2, 6, could be even 20 years. And it's good to Google when the registration fades, because it's possible that the sign out there doesn't say that it's still copyright, so you can use that. They can of course renew the registration, but yeah. And in few years there will be very big problem with finding new logos, new patterns, new designs, because every day there are so many new designs of the weapons, of the characters, environments, logos, whatever it is. So there will be a big problem with designing something completely new. I don't know what's going to happen in few years, but it's going to be very hard for us. So the easiest thing is to pay one company for designing logos or typography for you and just buy it. I know it takes money, but not so much according to the court, to the cases in the court. because it takes time and money, and you have to pay for lawyers, and your company can sue you for covering this cost. I know it's not fun, but I just needed to say that. And there is one word which is very important, it's confusion. Whenever someone sees design or logo which is confusing, similar to some company, you're done. I mean, you're fucked because if there is a confusion and someone could understand this image by telling something about their logo or their design, it's very messed up. And what I do with the faces, I totally recommend to make agreement with the person that you're making photo of, and that's actually very easy to do, because you can make a photo of anyone from your family or friends, and the best way is to ask for full rights to reuse image. But you can also pay pay to the model or someone. It doesn't take that much money as you can actually guess, but it's cheaper than suing with the stars who has similar faces as your designs. And the important thing is to pay from the company account or the cash, and you have to have this signature that you actually got the agreement. And also you can meet someone similar to the star, you know, because this guy on the right is not Leonardo DiCaprio, but he could be. If I would have rights from this guy, I would be so happy, you know, to use his face, you know. But you sometimes see people on the street, dude, you're like De Niro, can I make a photo of you? Yeah, you're making this photo, make agreement, he's signing up, you're paying money, he's signing that he got the money and the agreement. You should actually have the agreements all the time. So, yeah. And camera. About the weapons, it's very interesting because some companies allowed us to use their designs, but some of them completely deny that. And it's good to check is the copyrights for the actual design all the time, and just write to these companies. Some of them allows you to use their design. For instance, Colt doesn't allow use their weapons at all, but some Polish designers, which are very similar, they do. So you're done. You're free to use it. And if you don't, and you need something like that, you need to change at least 20%. But what is at 20% here? It's usually measured by the surfaces, but it could be colors, specular, it could be many different things. But the most important thing is not even the shape, because it's easy to use, but if there is some patterns on the top, it's for sure copyrighted all the time. And logos are usually registered black and white, but not always. As I said, it's the best way to pay one company, DTP company, to design some like bunch of 500 logos. They are very simple, not maybe the best ones, but you can use them in your world. And also, you can overpaint your pictures that you don't own, but keep it in-house. Yeah, you don't publish it outside. So whenever you do some concepts for your company, and it's possible that you're not going to be that long to pay attention to what is published in the end, please put the do not publish mark, because marketing and PR would know that it's not for use. And the second solution is to just hand draw like Wes Bart, because I love this guy and it's easy to avoid copyrights because of the hand drawing, but also he has to pay attention to the designs that he puts on the characters. And do some silly overpaints and change at least 20%. I usually change to 50%. Yeah, and that's all. That's my process, and thank you.